Hello everybody, this is Josie Violet Knits. Welcome back if you're new here. My name is Josie. Today we have a good old-fashioned knitting podcast. I've got two finished objects, a couple of WIPs, one of which I've been meaning to start for so long and I'm so happy that I finally started it. And then also at the end, I have a bit of chat about my backdrop, which is why I've gone quite wide with the angle here today. I think this is probably the last time I'm going to be filming this video in front of this backdrop, but I'm going to save that to the end because I know some of you are just here for the knitting and that is absolutely fine. So without further ado, let's get into it. I've been completely obsessed with knitting scarves at the moment. I don't quite know why. I think it's something to do with the weather. It's not quite hot enough for summer knits yet, but it's getting a little bit too hot to wear my big chunky sweaters. So I've just been obsessed with scarves. So this is my first finished object I wanted to talk to you today, which is actually my first ever self-drafted project. So this is a waffle stitch scarf with a contrasting I-cord edge around it. And I first had this idea when I went to Unravelled in February and I bought some yarns from Zakami, which is this hand dyer based in Edinburgh, and they had an amazing room in Unravel right at the top of the building, and the whole room was just so nice. All their yarns are just amazing. And I bought this yarn, which is a mix of baby alpaca, cashmere and silk, and I got that in the shade Milk and Honey. And I actually want a mini skein of the same yarn, so I chose this brown colour to go with it. Then when I got home, I had the idea of knitting a waffle stitch scarf with the contrast I-cord edge, and this is what I'm calling my burnt waffle scarf because it kind of looks like a burnt waffle. It's got the waffle stitch and then it's all like brown around the edge, and something about the hand dyed yarn makes it kind of a little bit more textured and does feel quite burnt in a weird way. So let me take this off. It's actually really hot in here today, so I probably can't wear this the whole video. It is just really hot. And I also unfortunately got a sunburn. I sat in my garden for a bit too long earlier and now I am a bit burnt, so that's not good. So this is what it looks like. It is essentially a triangle scarf and it has the I-cord running all around the edge. The way that I constructed this, it was quite tricky to figure out the waffle stitch pattern to start off with. I did get the hang of it in the end, but basically I just started in the middle, cast on a few stitches in the middle, and then I just kept increasing, just kept going, increasing either side on the edges. I basically just kept going until I had used up the yarn. So I think that's a nice thing about starting from the middle like this and then just expanding, is you basically can just keep going until you run out of yarn. And then when I'd knitted it wide enough, I then started doing an I-cord bind off all the way along the edge in the contrasting colour yarn. And then I had to figure out how to, because this tip is quite like a sharp angle, I had to figure out how to turn the corner and then start picking up along here and knitting a applied I-cord. And so from then on, the rest of it is applied I-cord all the way along up till you get back to where you started the original I-cord bind off. So that is how I made this. I definitely had a few issues with a few different things. First of all, I started knitting it holding it single. This is fingering weight yarn, and so I had to use quite small needles to make sure it wasn't too open of a gauge, and it was just taking a very, very long time. And I started to realise that the scarf would actually be massive. It would be like a very thin, very large scarf. And what I actually wanted was more of a medium-sized scarf that was somewhere in between a small scarf and a big scarf. And that is what I ended up getting in the end, because I eventually decided I just had to frog it. There was issues also with the selvage edge. I started off just doing a regular stockinette selvage edge, and it meant that it became very, very tight and it just didn't actually work. The tip here in the middle was just sort of curling up. I mean, it is actually still doing it a little bit, but it was doing it way worse. So I kind of just had to unravel it because of that. And then as I was unraveling it, I was thinking, actually, I kind of just want to hold this double. It will just make it all go a lot faster. And I am really happy that I did that. I feel like the fabric that he's created is really nice and squishy. And then I actually switched and did a slip stitch selvage edge instead, and that worked out a lot better. It still is a tiny bit, like, it still does slightly fold up, but to be honest, I don't really know if there's much, like, aside from a slip stitch edge, if anyone knows of any other types of edge that would fully stop this from happening. I just don't know if that actually exists. And when you're wearing it, it really doesn't matter. Like, you're not wearing it stretched out like this, so it doesn't really make a difference to the function of the scarf. But yeah, that's just like something that was kind of challenging me along the way of the design. And then also figuring out the best way to pick up for the I-cord in a way that would be easy to do, but also gave it enough slack that it wasn't really tight. In the end, I actually ended up picking up twice into the same slip stitch edge, because when you slip a stitch, it's actually going over 2 rows. So you kind of need that extra bit of I-cord to again make sure that it's not too tight. So even though this is a scarf, and I guess you could say quite a relatively simple design, there's actually so much that goes into designing something, and it's really just given me a new appreciation for knitwear designers and all the hard work that they put into their patterns, because this was a lot of thinking and a lot of brain power just to get this, and it is just a scarf. But yeah, so I'm very happy with how it turned out. I like how I did the increases on the edges rather than in the middle, because it just means that you don't have that line going down the middle that I know a lot of triangle scarves have, which I don't hate, but I just didn't want it in this one. I just wanted it to be kind of like an invisible line. I wonder if that's partly why it is curling up a bit in the middle though, because it doesn't have that angle going down the middle. So maybe that's why people put that line where the increases are coming from the middle. So yeah, that is my burnt waffle scarf, and it was very fun to try and figure out how to self-draft my own project, and I definitely have some ideas for more self-drafting to do in the future. I'm quite excited about just having the freedom to kind of design my own things. I love knitting patterns, but it was nice to use my creativity and use my brain a little bit more to create something that I thought of myself. So the other finished object I have is also a scarf. I told you I'm obsessed with scarves at the moment. This is, you probably know what this is. This is the Sophie scarf by Petite Knit, and I knit this in an amazing yarn, which is the Fonte Cur de Angora. It is an Angora yarn from a brand called Fonte, and I picked this up in Stockholm when I went there. I'll link my vlog from Stockholm, which shows me going to all the different yarn stores if you haven't seen it. And this is a very, very fluffy scarf. I love this colour. It is a lovely sort of baby pink colour, and I am just absolutely obsessed with this scarf. And I actually never thought I would knit a Sophie scarf, because for a long time I didn't quite get the small scarf thing. I just felt like it wouldn't really go with my style, and I don't know if it's just seeing lots of people. I think there was something about when I was in Stockholm, I saw lots of people wearing them. There's a lot of knitters in Stockholm, and everyone just looks so cool and chic with their little Sophie scarves, and it just made me want to knit one. So I guess I've just been influenced by the trend. This is just one skein, and I knit it on 4.5mm needles. So I think the good thing about the Sophie scarf is you can kind of just adapt it to what you want. As long as what I did was I weighed the ball of yarn as I went, and then when I was exactly halfway through the ball, I then started doing the decreases. So I pretty much use exactly the whole amount of yarn. And so it actually ended up being quite long, considering it was just one ball of yarn. And I think that was because the needles I was using were bigger than the recommended needles. Because it's a scarf, you can kind of just do whatever size you want, really. And so I think that has made it a bit more of a usable scarf. Like, I can wrap it twice around my neck, I can just have it long, and I can do the little like knot thing as well. So I've been loving this scarf. It is so fun to just throw on to a boring, if you just got like, I'm wearing now like a t-shirt and jeans, if you just throw on a little scarf, it just makes it feel like more of an outfit. And something about the fluffiness also just makes it feel a bit fancy. So I feel like it's a good way to like dress up a more casual outfit. And yeah, this yarn is very, very soft. I feel like because the fibres are quite long, I think if you're a bit sensitive, I would probably still say to stay away from it, to be honest. Like, it's not that there's something tickly about it. It's not itchy, but it's definitely a little bit tickly if you're sensitive to that kind of thing. I don't personally mind it too much. I'm not too sensitive to things like that, but I think if you were sensitive, you would feel maybe like you're being a bit tickled, but that doesn't really bother me too much, and I have been wearing this so much. Yeah, I'm just a big fan of this yarn. It is the most popular pattern on Ravelry in terms of projects, and everyone knows about it, but I just wanted to see what the fuss was about, and I can understand why it's so popular. So yeah, if you've just got like a random skein of some special yarn lying around, I do think this is a really good one. If anyone has any other ideas for like one skein scarves, let me know. I think I would quite like to make a video wrapping up lots of different scarf patterns for just single skeins of yarn at some point. I also know that Lane Publishing, you know how they did their 52 weeks of sweaters book recently, and they do their 52-week series. I've heard that their next one is going to be single skein, 52 weeks of one skein projects or something like that. So I'm also very intrigued for that to come out, because since I've been buying a bit more yarn lately, like on holiday and at yarn festivals, I think it is nice to have kind of a catalogue of projects that you can knit that are just those single skeins, so that when you buy something randomly on a whim, it actually goes to use. Because I'm sure a lot of you guys also have those random single skeins lying around. So let me know in the comments what your favourite single skein project is. I would love to know. Let's get on to whips. And I have finally started my Sweet Dreams sweater, which I've been talking about for months. I've had the yarn sitting here on my shelf for months, and I have finally cast it on, and I'm so excited about it. One of the reasons why I was so scared or maybe hesitant to cast on this project is that it starts with a tubular cast on, and for the body there is almost 300 stitches that you have to cast on the tubular cast on, and it's obviously in the round, and I just felt like that would be quite hard. I have done a tubular cast on before for a button band, but that was, I think, 12 stitches, and that I struggled with. After a while I got the rhythm and the sort of feeling for it, but the problem I was having with it is when you do the tubular cast on, the stitches are very sort of like, they're not really like formed, they're not attached, they're not sort of set properly. They can easily get twisted off, or if you sort of move the needle the wrong way, the stitches can just sort of disintegrate and almost like disappear. And so I was just really worried about doing that for almost 300 stitches, and I just felt like it would take forever, and so I just procrastinated it. Someone did also have a good idea of starting with a sleeve, which was what I was going to do. And then, but I was about to do that, and then I just can't find my little Knit Pro shorty case anywhere, and I'm really annoyed. So I was about to start doing the sleeve, because I was thinking, well, a sleeve is just like a smaller circumference to like practice doing the tubular cast on, blah, blah, blah. And then I just couldn't find my shorties. So then I was like, okay, is there a different way? Should I just start the body? Because I really just was in the mood to get started. I'm just really in the mood to knit some colour work at the moment. So I was looking around the internet to figure out, like, is there a better way to do the tubular cast on? And thank God for Roxanne Richardson, who has saved my life so many times. She had a video, and also Very Pink Knits also had a video of the same technique of basically you can start a tubular cast on from any type of cast on. You start with any type of cast on that you like. I started with a long tail cast on, but you can do basically any cast on that is your favourite cast on. And then from there, and then you only have to cast on half the amount of stitches that you actually need. And then from there, you then go and do a round where you, something to do with slipping the stitches and doing yarn overs to double the amount of stitches that you have on the needles. And I can't really remember how I did it, to be honest, but I'll link the videos down below if you're interested in this technique. But basically you do it on scrap yarn, and then somehow it kind of feels like witchcraft. Like I still don't fully understand how it works, but I just followed the instructions and it seemed to work. Somehow then the scrap yarn, you can just take the scrap yarn off and somehow you have a tubular cast on. I actually left a little bit to show you how it looks. This is just the scrap yarn that I used, but then you can just take the scrap yarn off and you're left behind with a tubular cast on. I think it's pretty cool. The benefits of doing it this way is, first of all, you don't have to cast on as many stitches because you just do yarn overs to increase it. And then it also makes it easier to join in the round because by the time you join, you have a little bit of a thicker bit that you have created. So it makes it easier to see if you're twisting the project when you join in the round. One thing I would recommend, which Roxanne Richardson did say in the video, but I just didn't watch the video till the end before I started, which I should have done, which is you're supposed to go down a couple of needle sizes when you do the initial cast on the scrap yarn, which I didn't do. And by the time I realised that I was supposed to have done that, I'd gotten quite far into it. And honestly, it took me a whole evening still just to do this initial bit. And I just couldn't be bothered to go back. And I think it's okay. It's flaring out a little bit on the bottom, but I feel like once I've blocked it and once the ribbing has stretched out a little bit more in blocking, I think it's going to be okay. I'm not too worried about it. So I would definitely recommend to go down 2 needle sizes when you do that initial bit. And then once I got to the first round of colour work, I also forgot to go up a needle size. So there's like a weird little bit here where it's a little bit tight because it's the same needle size on the colour work as it is for the ribbing. But weirdly, I kind of like how it looks. It kind of like has defined the first like colour work section a little bit. And again, I just couldn't be bothered to go back and fix it. So I just kept knitting, and then I eventually remembered and went up the needle sizes that I was supposed to. But I feel like I'm just trying to, a little bit when I can, be a little bit less of a perfectionist in my knitting. Obviously, if there's like a big problem, I always think it's good to go back. But when it's things that I just genuinely don't think will make a difference, and that is something that I'm learning as I start knitting more and more, is learning what things actually matter and what things don't really matter. Like anything to do with fit obviously makes a really big deal, but anything that's just like a little thing about a needle size, like for a small maybe round or whatever, it just generally doesn't make that much of a difference. And so I just kept going and I was like, I'm just gonna have fun with this, and I'm having so much fun that yeah, I'm just not sort of like, I'm just trying to turn off my perfectionist brain a little bit. Now this is the Sweet Dreams sweater by Kylie Noel. This is a all over colourwork sweater. It does have steeking at the arms. It's knit from the bottom up. It is knit in the round, and then once you get to the armholes, you keep going and then you steek the armholes, and then you do a little bit of knitting flat when you get more towards the top. And I'm knitting this in Peer Gynt. I've tried to go for a bit of a mix of warm and cool tones, and the base colour is just kind of this beigey, oatmeal-y colour, and then there's lots of blues, pinks, browns, and yeah, I'm just loving how all these colours are looking together. I've done a little bit of a colouring in sort of colour plan, but to be honest, I'm kind of just winging it and it's kind of fun to just like pick random ones, whatever I feel like as I'm knitting, and yeah, I'm kind of vaguely sticking to the plan, but also just partly just making up as I go, which is kind of fun as well. But I would say when I'm knitting this at night, there's been a few times where I thought I was knitting with one colour, but I actually was knitting with a different colour, but I didn't realise because it was dark and I couldn't see what I was doing. So just bear that in mind if you're knitting colour work at night, to maybe just look in the light at what you're actually doing. But it actually ended up kind of cool. Like, I thought I was knitting with a beige, but I was knitting with a pink. But I actually kind of like how it looks. So I'm just learning again to let go of the perfectionism and just sort of like have fun with it. And it's been really enjoyable. I like how in the design there's quite a lot of rows. There's quite a lot of rounds that are just one colour, so there's nothing too complicated compared to something like the Rosie sweater, which I've knit, where it's very irregular and hard to kind of memorise the big, long, different numbers of stitches you have to memorise. With this one so far, it's been very, very simple. It's like 3-1 or one every other one is a different colour. It's nothing too hard to memorise, which has been really nice. And I feel like it has just been absolutely flying. I think how people say stripes are addictive, I feel like this kind of colour work is so addictive because you just are seeing the design appear with each round and it's just so fun. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. The only other thing I would say is this is the first time I've knit a colour work with like lots of different colours. I've only ever previously knit a colour work with just 2 colours. So I was not prepared for the amount of ends there are. And it does say in the pattern, it says you should weave in your ends as you go because otherwise you'll just end up with so many ends to weave in at the end. And I do agree with that. And I did start doing that for the first like couple of rounds and then I just sort of stopped. And now I have so many ends here. I've been trying to carry some of them up the rows. Like if I'm using the same colour, if I know that I'm going to be using that same colour a couple of rows up, I will not cut it and I'll just keep going with it. But then there are some bits where I know that I'm not going to use that colour for a while and I feel like it would be too many rows to go up. So then I have been cutting it because if you don't cut it, then you just end up with loads of balls of yarn attached to the project and you feel like a spider in a spider's web. And it's very annoying for anyone sitting next to you because they keep getting tangled, which has been happening. So I've been trying to cut when I can and just trying to think a few rounds ahead of where I'm going to be using that same colour next. But I do need to start weaving them in as I go because it is getting a bit silly. So that is I guess the only downside of knitting with so many different colours, but it's really, really fun and I'm just so excited to keep going with this. It is a bit of a weird time of year to be knitting a really thick colourwork sweater, but I don't really care, I'm just having fun. I feel like the colours are quite spring-like, so I feel like this is just becoming a bit of a process knit for me at the moment rather than a product knit because I know that the product is not going to be worn probably until autumn at this point. And then the other project I've been working on quite a bit lately is my Super Basic Tee by Oh What a Knit. This is one of those projects that is going to be taking a long time. I feel like I actually doesn't look like I've done much since I last updated you on this. So I have done the left shoulder and I'm just starting on the right shoulder. This is knit on 3mm needles. So this project is probably going to be one of those projects that takes so long, a bit like my Maggie cardigan, which was on 3.5mm needles. I just feel like this is going to be one of those projects that you just have to chip away at for a long time. But I'm enjoying that, and the main reason I'm enjoying that is the yarn. The yarn is Albertine by Durarum Natura and it's in this really nice sort of pinky beigey colour. I just wanted a basic white t-shirt and I feel like this colour is quite an interesting shade of sort of pinky beige. It is 90% wool and 10% silk, but this yarn is so like, you know how some yarn is splitty and when you twist it, it untwists and there's all like lots of bits and it's really annoying? This is like the opposite of that. This is the most like together yarn, the most unsplitty yarn I've ever used, and that's just so good because it is so thin. I think if it was splitty and thin, it would just be so annoying. I previously knit on small needles with things like linen yarn, and that is like super splitty, and that has really hurt my hands. Even like knitting for olive cotton merino, I feel like sometimes that can be quite splitty. And so I kind of thought that small needle knitting just wasn't right for my hands, but I think it was actually the yarn rather than the needles that was causing the problem, because this does not hurt my hands at all. This feels so sort of satisfying to knit, and yeah, I'm just absolutely a big fan of this yarn. I'm just a big fan of Durarum Natura in general. Their Gilead yarn is what I knit my Lakes pullover with, and that yarn has barely pilled. I wear that jumper all the time, like multiple times a week. It's probably my most worn thing I have knit, and it's partly down to how good that yarn is. So yeah, I'm just a big fan of this brand. So if you've been looking for a new yarn brand to try out, I would definitely recommend looking at some of the yarns from Durarum Natura. I've only tried Albertine and Gilead, but I am just obsessed with both of them. I just love all the little attention to details in this pattern, and it has really clear explanations of when you're picking up stitches, where to pick up the stitches, and I just really enjoying the style of pattern. It's very simple, clean and minimal, but very well thought through in terms of the knitter's experience of when they're knitting the pattern, explaining what needs to be explained, but then not over explaining other things that are pretty obvious. So, and I can't wait to have a knitted t-shirt. It's probably going to take quite a few more months, and I'm just learning to be okay with that. But that is my super basic tee. So that was all the projects I had to share with you. If you just were here for the knitting, feel free to leave now. But I wanted to talk about a little bit about my house renovations and my plans for this knitting room. Well, it's not really a knitting room, it's more my office that I just have all my yarn in, and it's where I wind my yarn, and it's where I work. I work from home, so I work in here as well. But yeah, we moved into this house in February, and we have been having quite a lot of surprises in this house. It is a 1930s house, and so there's been quite a lot of things that have surprised us along the way. We're now safe to progress to plastering the rooms, which means basically there's these built-ins in this room, and I don't know if you can see, they're a bit badly built, or at the very least they're just very old and kind of wonky and not quite straight, and the shelves are just like not actually attached. So basically what we need to do now is, in order to get this room properly plastered, which includes the ceiling and the walls, we're gonna have to pull the built-ins out. So I'm gonna have to take all this yarn off these shelves. I'm gonna have to move all of my nice things that I like having around, and basically demolish this room, and it's just gonna become an empty shell. So it's kind of scary and stressful, but at the same time it's a bit exciting because I have basically a blank slate, and I can kind of do what I want with this room. So I'm quite excited to have a think about how I can design this room to fit exactly what I use it for. I also have a reformer Pilates machine in this room. So I have like a lot of, so I have my desk, I have my reformer machine, I have my yarn, and I also just want somewhere really nice to store my yarn, because it just makes me happy to walk into a room and look at my yarn on the shelf. But I'm thinking maybe some kind of like glass cabinet. So there's lots of potential, and I'm very excited to figure out what I'm going to do. At the moment, I'm just focused on ripping it all out. But I would like to hear how you store your yarn, how you have it organised, whether you like to have it on display or whether you keep it in boxes, or what you do with it, because I feel like for me, I have to visually be able to see it on a regular basis, otherwise I will just forget that it's there. So I think I need to have a way to display it so that I can see it every day when I'm walking around, but also keep it protected from moths. So if anyone has any ideas, whether you think a glass cabinet is a good idea, or if actually having it in a cupboard is not a good idea. I've heard that moths like darkness, so I think a glass cabinet would probably help, just because then at least there's light coming through, and I think they don't like light as much. I have also been getting lots of paint sample cards. I got a lot of these ones from Coat. They do this thing where you can like order a big pack of different cards, and it supposedly looks like the paint will actually look. I don't know how true that is, like how close these are to the actual shades, but this is kind of what I'm thinking, some sort of like plaster pink type colour. I think might be quite nice in here. In a weird way, it's actually kind of similar to this, isn't it? Maybe I was inspired by my super basic tee to get these paint colours, I don't know. But the one that I think I'm leaning towards most at the moment is this Factor 50 shade, which is quite similar to Farrow & Ball's Setting Plaster, which I've also swatched on the wall, but I'm still not 100% sure. I've also been experimenting with a good tip, which is you can basically get any like fancy paint colour mixed and matched in B&Q in the UK. I don't know if it's the same in other countries, but you can go in and say, can you just make me a Farrow & Ball setting plaster, and they will match it. And I've been testing it, and they are like pretty accurate and close to the original. So that's a good money saving tip if you're thinking of painting lots of rooms, because we have so many rooms to paint that the cost of doing like Farrow & Ball or Little Green, one of those companies, even though I do really like the fact that they're very like non-toxic and stuff like that, it just gets a bit pricey when you start adding it all up. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you again soon. Who knows what the setting is going to look like next time I film a video. I don't even know at the moment. Let me know what you're knitting on at the moment, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!